They erected 96 houses on his property, and when they had the audacity to sue him for trespassing, he entered the courtroom armed with a single sheet of paper, a document that silenced them all. It began when the roar of heavy machinery shattered the morning tranquility, an unwelcome, waking nightmare. Rodney Calhoun watched from the boundary of his ancestral land, his gaze fixed on a fleet of bulldozers carving through the very earth where his grandfather had once sown corn. Now, those machines were raising it, erasing his land, his heritage. It was vanishing under layers of red clay and steel rebar. He leaned against the familiar frame of his old Ford truck, sheer disbelief etched onto his features. As a man who had dedicated decades to surveying property for others, Rodney understood boundaries with an expert's precision, but this was entirely different. The survey markers were misplaced, the property lines were askew, and the construction crews were behaving as if they held the deed. One of them, a tall man in a fluorescent vest, approached, yelling to be heard over the din. "Sir, you need to leave. This is a private construction site." Rodney, however, kept his voice steady and low. He simply gestured towards the nearest survey stake. "Private, you say? You're a full 300 yards deep inside my property line." The worker scoffed, dismissing him with a wave. "Sir, the Homeowners Association owns this parcel now. It's Magnolia Grove. I'd suggest you call the county before you find yourself in real trouble." Rodney offered no reply, turning his gaze back across the ravaged field. He looked to where his grandfather's ancient pecan grove once stood, now just a graveyard of splintered stumps beneath a bulldozer's track. His jaw tightened, yet he remained composed, remembering his grandfather's old adage, "Never waste your breath arguing with a fool, especially one who can't tell where his own ground ends." That evening, back in his humble home near Somerville, Rodney sat at his kitchen table. A fresh pot of coffee sent steam curling up beside a stack of survey maps. He unfurled them, meticulously tracing the faint boundary lines with a weathered finger. Every single measurement was perfect. The land was unequivocally in the Calhoun name, the deed untouched for more than 60 years. His phone vibrated against the table. It was his cousin, Benny Rucker, calling all the way from Columbia. "Rod, you won't believe what I'm seeing. They're already listing homes for sale out there, Magnolia Grove Estates. Over 90 units. They're advertising it like it's a done deal." Rodney's hand froze over the map. "A done deal? On my land? That's what it looks like, cousin. You'd better get down to the courthouse and pull the filings. I can't find a single record of you ever selling that parcel." Rodney drew a long, slow breath, his eyes fixed on the impenetrable darkness beyond his kitchen window. For the first time in decades, that piece of earth, the one his grandfather always called the Calhoun ground, felt profoundly vulnerable. Something was unfolding in secret, and it seemed the county itself was complicit. The following morning, he drove to the Charleston County Recorder's office, where he was met by the clerk, Janice Poole. She was a woman he'd known for years, and she offered a polite smile that never quite managed to reach her eyes. "Morning, Rodney. What can I do for you today?" "I need to see the ownership records for parcel 19A, the one off Goose Creek Road," he specified. Her practiced smile faltered. "That parcel is currently under review." "Under review?" he echoed. "For new development filings? By whom?" Janice hesitated for a moment. "The developers. From Magnolia Grove Holdings. They submitted the plans 2 years ago. Weren't you sent the notice?" Rodney's knuckles whitened as he gripped the counter's edge. "I've paid the taxes on that land every single year since my father passed. And you're telling me someone has filed plans to build homes on it without my signature?" Janice's eyes darted nervously to her computer screen. Leaning in, she lowered her voice to a whisper. "Look, Rodney, off the record. You need to go see the county assessor. Something about that plot just isn't right." By the time he walked out of that office, his coffee was stone cold, and his patience had worn dangerously thin. The drive home was shrouded in a heavy silence, broken only by the relentless ticking of the turn signal as he veered onto the familiar gravel road. Every few hundred feet, a new sign assaulted his view. "Future home of Magnolia Grove Estates." Each one felt less like an announcement and more like a threat. Rodney slammed the truck into park beside the old fence line and stepped out. The air, thick with the scent of sawdust and damp earth, did little to calm the storm inside him as he kicked angrily at the soil. His boots scuffed away the dirt, revealing one of his grandfather's old metal survey pins rusted, yet stubbornly in place. That pin was his anchor. It was his proof. It was proof that this land was not theirs for the taking. Later that week, fueled by a cold resolve, he marched directly into the on-site construction trailer. The developers were in the middle of a meeting, 3 men in crisp shirts and polished shoes, huddled over blueprints. Uninvited and undeterred, Rodney stood his ground. "You're building on the wrong piece of land," he stated, his voice flat and steady. One of them glanced up, his expression a mask of irritation. "Sir, this property was purchased legally, fair and square. We have all the necessary paperwork to prove it." "Then show me," Rodney shot back. The man let out a condescending chuckle. "That's not how this operates. If you have a problem, you can bring it to the Homeowners Association's attention. Once the construction is finished." Rodney's gaze fell to the plans spread across the table, his grandfather's field dissected before his eyes. It was carved up into numbered lots and cul-de-sacs. A knot of ice formed in his gut. "You're making a colossal mistake." He delivered the line, then turned and walked out before they could utter another word. That very night, he found himself prying open his grandfather's old metal box. Its lock had been rusted shut for decades. Inside, buried beneath a bundle of old letters and a worn pocket knife, lay the original deed, hand-signed, dated 1958, and sealed by the county. There was no ambiguity. That land was his. But Rodney understood that a fight this significant wouldn't be won overnight. Someone with immense power coveted that land, and they were prepared to erase his family's name from history to claim it. This was a battle Rodney Calhoun had been unknowingly prepared for, growing up on the same story. He heard it every Sunday after church, the tale of how his grandfather, Hiram Calhoun, had purchased that very land back in 1958. He'd done it with savings scraped together from years of back-breaking labor at a Walterboro lumber mill. Hiram had begun his life with next to nothing, but he forged a legacy, acre by hard-earned acre, clearing the dense brush with his own 2 hands and planting pecan trees where the soil was most fertile. When Hiram passed on, the land was entrusted to Rodney's father, Gerald Calhoun, who guarded it with the same unyielding pride. Rodney could still remember tagging along as a small boy, watching his father mark the boundaries with blazing orange paint, hearing him say, "Son, a man's land isn't just dirt. It's the proof that he existed." That simple truth became etched into Rodney's soul for the rest of his life. By the time Gerald passed, Rodney was in his late 40s, making a living as a surveyor in the Charleston area. He earned enough for a stable life, but by no means a wealthy one. When the will was to be read, the family convened in the modest office of their attorney. Her name was Louise Benton, a woman who had managed the estates of local families for decades. With a practiced motion, she slid a single, yellowed document across the polished desk. "Mr. Calhoun," she began, carefully adjusting her spectacles, "your father's final wish was for the property to remain in your name," remarking that he knew Rodney would understand as his mind drifted back to the family picnics. He could almost smell the pecans roasting in autumn, see the old farmhouse, crooked yet proud. It was never an investment to him. It was simply a touchstone to his past, and for years, he left the land undisturbed, visiting only on weekends. He'd cut the grass, walk the fence lines, and watch herons glide over the marsh, finding a profound peace in the stillness. It was a peace that connected him to his very roots. But then Charleston began to transform, with highways widening and developers arriving in droves. They came waving checkbooks and grand promises, and soon, houses were sprouting like invasive weeds, turning old country roads into subdivision. What had once been miles of pine forest was now a landscape of golf courses and gated communities, and inevitably, the letters started arriving for Rodney. Offers to purchase the land, some courteous, others bordering on hostile, mostly from faceless corporate entities he'd never heard of. His response was always unwavering. "The land is not for sale," a sentiment his cousin Benny could never quite grasp. "Rod, you're sitting on a gold mine, man," Benny would say. "You could cash out, move somewhere luxurious, and let them build their fancy houses." Rodney would only offer a faint smile. "My granddaddy didn't break his back in the summer sun for me to hand it over to strangers." That land was the last chapter of his family's history, and he considered himself its guardian, not its owner. But then the letters abruptly stopped, and the bulldozers began their relentless advance, making him realize the decision had been made without him. and his thoughts turned to the last real conversation, the one he'd shared with his father before he passed away, out at the old farmhouse on a spring evening, with the air thick with the scent of honeysuckle. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, Gerald had leaned heavily on his cane and foretold, "They'll come for it one day, son. Mark my words, keep those papers safe. The county records might get fuzzy, but paper never lies." That chilling warning now echoed in Rodney's mind. He had guarded those papers just as his father instructed, never imagining the day would come when he would actually need them. He brought the aged deed to a friend at the courthouse, Robert Lang, who worked in land records, and watched as Robert keyed the parcel number into the system. He ran it twice, a frown deepening on his face. "Rodney, this says the land was rezoned 4 years ago. Subdivision approval was signed by a Fenton. Rezoned for construction?" Rodney leaned in, his voice tight. "Without my consent?" Robert hesitated. "That's the peculiar part. The ownership record is still in your name. It looks like someone pushed paperwork through using your parcel ID. It never should have cleared. But you know how it is. Things tend to get fast-tracked when there's a great deal of money changing hands." Rodney's heart hammered against his ribs. "Are you telling me they've built an entire neighborhood on property that legally belongs to me?" Robert's voice dropped to a whisper. "That is precisely what I'm telling you. And if you have any sense, you'll hire a lawyer before they start issuing titles to homeowner." For the very first time in his life, Rodney felt like he was witnessing his family's entire history being systematically erased. He was watching it happen in real time. This was no longer just about a piece of land. It was about dignity, about respect for the generations who came before. His family had paid their taxes, maintained the boundaries, and abided by every rule, only to have a corporation unilaterally write them out of their own legacy. That night, he drove back out to the property, his headlights cutting across the skeletons of half-finished homes, and the sight struck him like a physical blow. Children's bicycles were already leaning against new porches, and shiny new mailboxes stood waiting by the roadside. Families would be moving in soon, and not a single one of them would ever know they were building their lives on the foundation of someone else's heritage. He pulled the truck to a stop and stepped out into the night. In that moment, with the faint chorus of frogs from the nearby creek as his only witness, he swore an oath to himself. No shouting, no theatrics. He would handle this the way his grandfather would have. He would prove his case, line by line, inch by painstaking inch, though Rodney knew the true cost. Months buried in dusty archives, facing down stoic officials and waging a solitary war against men with bottomless pockets and silver-tongued attorneys, what he couldn't yet fathom was just how deep they had already buried the truth. 2 weeks after his trip to the courthouse, Rodney found himself driving back down Goose Creek Road. The place that once was a field of tall grass and proud pecan trees was now a scar of concrete driveways and skeletal rooftops. All day, trucks rumbled in and out, laden with lumber, paint, and PVC pipe. The air, thick with the scent of tar and fresh sawdust, choked him. He pulled over near a line of portable toilets and just watched for a moment. Sales banners were already up, their bright blue flags snapping defiantly in the wind. Magnolia Grove, starting from the 420s, was printed in bold white letters. Families were already strolling through the lots, led by real estate agents clutching glossy brochures. It felt like a nightmare. Rodney stepped out of his truck, a folder held tightly under his arm. Inside were the documents he'd spent the last year compiling, copies of the deed, survey maps. He spotted a man in a hard hat, a clipboard in his hand, and walked straight toward him. "Morning," Rodney said, his voice steady. "Are you the site manager?" The man turned, squinting at him. "Yeah, I'm Gregory Duncan. Can I help you? You can start by explaining what your people are doing building on land that isn't yours." Gregory chuckled, assuming it was some kind of prank. "Sir, Magnolia Grove Holdings owns every single inch of this parcel. We bought it fair and square from the county." Rodney held out a photocopy of the deed. "You might want to check your facts." Gregory took it, his reluctance obvious, and glanced at the paper. "This says Calhoun Family Trust. That can't be right. We have all the permits, taxes, and a clean title search." "Then someone committed forgery," Rodney replied flatly, "because this land has been in my family for 3 generations. The man's confidence wavered. He shifted his weight, glancing toward the construction office trailer. "Look, I just manage the construction. You need to talk to corporate. Magnolia Grove Holdings. They're based out of Greenville. They handle all the legal paperwork. I've already spoken to the county," Rodney stated. They confirmed the parcel is still registered in my name. Gregory's voice dropped. Then I suggest you get a lawyer, sir. Because once these homes are sold, it's completely out of our hands. Rodney's jaw clenched. He turned and walked back to his truck, each step feeling heavier than the last. He could hear the distant laughter of the work crew and the rhythmic hammering of nails echoing across the property. That sound once meant progress to him. Now, it was the sound of theft. That night, he was back on the phone with Benny. They're nearly done with the first phase, Rodney explained. They have families touring the lots like they already own them. Benny let out a heavy sigh. You have to take this to the courts, Rod. You're just wasting your breath arguing with foremen. You need a lawyer who specializes in property law. I'm on it, Rodney replied. But first, I need to understand exactly how they manage this. Someone inside that county office had to have signed something they had no right to. For the next several days, he immersed himself in the search, poring over old property tax receipts. Every single one was stamped and paid. He cross-referenced the county's survey records with his own notes. The coordinates weren't just off. The boundaries bled into each other. It was painfully clear now. Magnolia Grove had developed the wrong parcel of land, and the error had gone completely unnoticed. He drove straight to the local zoning office in Monk's Corner, ready to confront whoever had approved this catastrophe. The receptionist was a young man named Eddie Hurst. The man looked visibly startled when Rodney gave him the parcel number. 1 SEC, Eddie said, his fingers clattering across the keyboard. Yeah, that subdivision plan was signed off back in 2019. The file says owner consent is attached. Rodney's eyebrows shot up. Owner consent? Whose signature is on it? Eddie leaned in, his face close to the screen. It looks like someone named Gerald Calhoun. Rodney went cold. That's my father. He's been dead since 2013. Eddie blinked, the blood draining from his face. Sir, that's just not possible, he stammered. Rodney stepped closer. Are you telling me a dead man signed off on selling 70 acres of my land? Eddie fumbled for words. Sir, I can't say anything more without my supervisor's approval. Then get your supervisor, Rodney said, his voice hard as steel. Moments later, a woman in a blue blazer appeared. Karen Sloan, the zoning administrator. She offered a smile that was polite but held no warmth. Mr. Calhoun, I understand there's a misunderstanding about a parcel in Goose Creek. There is no misunderstanding, he replied flatly. Someone forged my father's signature and sold land that was never for sale. She folded her arms, a picture of bureaucratic defense. Those documents were cleared through all the proper legal channels. If you have evidence of forgery, you'll need to file a civil claim. Until such time, our records stand. Rodney looked her dead in the eye. Then I'll see you in court. He left the office without another word. On the drive home, he couldn't shake her expression from his mind. It wasn't shock he'd seen. It was avoidance. It was the look of someone who knew more than she was willing to admit. That night, he sat at his kitchen table again in the exact same spot, where his grandfather used to balance his checkbook. Papers were spread everywhere. Old surveys, faded tax stamps, and land plats. With a pen, he drew lines, connecting every detail, every signature, every single inconsistency. He finally called an attorney, Jesse Brome, a local man who specialized in property disputes. Jesse listened patiently. As he flipped through the pages Rodney brought, he spoke. You've got a solid case, Jesse said, but they are not going to roll over easily. You're talking about an entire development, 96 houses. That's millions of dollars. They'll drag this out, they'll threaten you. Maybe they'll even try to buy you off. Rodney's reply was steady. They can try whatever they want. I'm not selling what's already mine. Jesse gave a slow nod. All right then. The first step is title verification through the county recorder's archive. If we can prove the chain of ownership was never legally broken, we've got them. Rodney leaned back in his chair, exhaustion in his eyes, but a fire in his voice. Then let's prove it. But Jesse's warning stuck with him long after he left. When you stand between money and land, people don't play fair, and Rodney was about to find out exactly how far they would go to protect their mistake. 3 mornings later, Rodney parked outside the temporary Magnolia Grove office, a 2-story, prefab trailer sitting beside a field of model homes. It was early, before 9 o'clock, and a faint mist clung to the road. He sat in the truck for a moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm the quiet storm building inside his chest. This wasn't born of anger, but of a quiet resolve to be heard. He entered the building, a manila folder tucked firmly under his arm. Behind the reception desk sat a woman in her 40s, her red nails and polished smile radiating a practiced warmth. "Good morning. Welcome to Magnolia Grove. Are you here to view a property?" "No," Rodney stated, his voice level. "I'm here to speak with the person in charge of development." Her professional smile wavered for just a moment. "Do you have an appointment?" "I will," he replied, "the moment I step through that door." He gestured with a nod toward the glass-walled office behind her. After a brief hesitation, the receptionist lifted the receiver, and mere seconds later, a tall man in a crisp blue suit emerged. "Mr. Calhoun, I presume? Gregory mentioned you paid a visit to the site." Rodney met his stare without flinching. "That's correct. And you must be the one responsible for building on my land." The man offered a constrained laugh. "Let's take this to a more private setting. I'm Brian Fenton, CEO of Magnolia Grove Holdings." He gestured towards a small conference room. Rodney followed him in. The conference table was covered in glossy maps and architectural renderings of homes that had no right to be there. Brian poured himself a cup of coffee, pointedly not offering one to Rodney. "Mr. Calhoun," he began with practiced smoothness, "I understand. There's been some confusion regarding the land survey. But let me assure you, we have meticulously followed every legal protocol." Rodney slapped the deed onto the table. "Then explain this. This document bears my grandfather's signature and my name. As the current owner, it was never sold, never transferred." Brian gave the document a cursory, unimpressed glance. "Old deeds can be a tricky business, sir. Parcels occasionally overlap due to antiquated records. It's precisely why we rely on the county's official approval." "You mean the same county office that accepted a dead man's signature to approve your plans?" Rodney's voice cut through the air. "And you didn't think to double-check that?" Brian's expression hardened. "That's quite an allegation, Mr. Calhoun. I'd suggest you watch your words." Rodney leaned forward, his voice low. "Being careful is exactly what brought me here. You people started digging before you even bothered to verify ownership." For a tense moment, the room was utterly silent. Then Brian offered a small, measured smile. "I admire your conviction, but from our perspective, this project is simply too far along to halt. I'm certain, however, that there's a reasonable figure we can discuss. Compensation, perhaps. Maybe even a partnership." Rodney stared at him, a wave of disbelief crashing over him. "You're offering to buy my own land from me? Call it a settlement," Brian shrugged. "You avoid a lengthy court battle, we finish construction. Everybody wins." Rodney rose slowly to his feet. "My grandfather poured his entire life into that land. You are not buying your way out of what you stole." Brian's smile finally vanished. "Then I hope you're prepared for a very long fight, because once those homes are sold, you'll be the one trying to evict 96 families." Rodney gathered his papers. "I'm not evicting anyone. I'm holding the people who did this accountable." He turned and walked out, the door clicking shut behind him. The receptionist deliberately avoided his gaze as he passed. Outside, the morning mist had burned away. It revealed rows of nearly finished houses. Painters were meticulously working on trim, landscapers were planting shrubs, and in the distance, a realtor laughed with a young couple. They were talking about building a future here. Rodney stood silently on the gravel, just watching. For them, this was a dream coming true. For him, it was a theft, unfolding in broad daylight. Later that day, his attorney, Jesse, called. "You met with them?" "Yeah," Rodney confirmed. "They tried to buy me out." "That figures," Jesse replied. "They'll keep applying pressure. Don't let them bully you. We're going to subpoena their purchase records and the county filings. Once we establish the chain of title, their entire case will crumble." Rodney rubbed his temples. "They have deep pockets, Jesse. They'll bury us in legal battles for years. Then we'll proceed with deliberate patience," Jesse affirmed. "Patience is what wins these land battles." A faint, weary laugh escaped Rodney. "That's exactly what my granddad always used to say." In the weeks that followed, the pressure intensified. Calls from HOA board members became relentless, each message laced with thinly veiled intimidation. One voicemail, however, cut through the noise. It was from a man named Trent Harper, the president of the HOA. "Mr. Calhoun, this is Trent from Magnolia Grove Estates. We've been made aware of your so-called ownership claim. I must strongly advise you to keep off the property. Until the courts have resolved this matter, trespassing charges are the last thing you want staining your record." Rodney played it back twice, slowly shaking his head. The sheer arrogance of the man ignited a fire within him. There was no way he was backing down now. It didn't matter how hard they tried to frighten him. The very next Sunday, right after church, he drove back out to the property. Near the community center, a group of new homeowners gathered, excitedly taking pictures of their almost finished houses. Rodney parked a short distance away, observing them in silence. A young couple, with 2 small children in tow, waved at him, assuming he was one of the contractors. He managed a tight, polite nod. They were oblivious, all of them. Jesse's words echoed in his thoughts. Patience wins these land battles. He lowered the tailgate of his truck, retrieved a small bundle of old metal survey pins, and started walking along the edge of the road. One by one, he hammered them back into the earth, each pin precisely where it belonged, just as his grandfather had taught him. But then he saw a black SUV parked across the road, its engine humming, watching him in silence. He knew then this had escalated far beyond a simple property dispute. Someone was determined to see him give up, and they were willing to shadow his every move to ensure it. The following morning, Rodney awoke to the sound of rain. As it tapped against his window panes, he sat at the kitchen table, his gaze fixed on the sea of papers spread before him. The entire surface was consumed by survey maps, photocopied tax receipts, and a single, old black-and-white photograph of his grandfather. In the photo, he was standing proudly beside the original Calhoun property sign. Rodney took a sip of his cold coffee and whispered to the empty room, "If they think they can just erase our family, they've picked the wrong man." That same day, he drove to the Charleston County Archive building. It was an old brick structure near Meeting Street. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, illuminating endless rows of metal cabinets. They stretched as far as the eye could see. Behind the main counter sat Clara Bynes, a retired clerk who now volunteered her time. She was there to help locals trace their property histories. "Rodney Calhoun," she said with a warm smile as he approached. "I haven't seen you in years. What brings you back to this dusty place?" "Trouble," he stated plainly. "I need to pull every single record tied to Parcel 19. Magnolia Grove is building on it, and I have good reason to believe the transfer of ownership was fraudulent." Clara's expression immediately softened with concern. "I'd heard whispers about that, but I never imagined it was you they were talking about," she said. "All right, let's see what we can find." She led him over to a microfilm reader, a machine that looked like it hadn't been used in ages. As the film spun, document after document flickered across the screen. Land plats, zoning requests, survey approvals. Rodney took notes with methodical precision, just as he had always done when he worked in the field. After an hour of searching, Clara suddenly froze the film on a single page. "Here," she said, pointing at the screen. "This is the rezoning request, filed in 2019. Rodney leaned in closer. The signature box read Gerald Calhoun, his father's name, but it was written in a shaky, unfamiliar scrawl. And then he saw the date. The year was 2019, a full 6 years after his father's funeral. "Clara, can you print that for me?" She hesitated, her hand hovering. "Are you certain you want a copy of this? It's official county property." Rodney offered her a weary smile. "Clara, if I don't take it now, they'll make sure it vanishes forever." She didn't press the matter. She printed the document, discreetly sliding it into a folder. "You never received this from me," she whispered. Rodney gave a grateful nod and walked out, his heart hammering against his ribs. That single piece of paper was the key to shattering the entire case, wide open, but he knew he couldn't stop there. His next stop was the assessor's office, followed by a deep dive into the notary database, and his final destination, the chambers of Judge Alvin Kerr, the very man who had approved the subdivision's questionable zoning variances. Kerr's assistant attempted to dismiss him, but Rodney held his ground. "I just need to know one thing," he stated firmly. "Who delivered the consent form to this office?" The assistant shot a nervous glance toward the judge's closed door. "Judge Kerr has a strict policy against discussing signed documents. You'll need to submit a formal request through the proper channels." Rodney sighed. "That's the same story I get from everyone." He turned to walk away, but just before he reached the hall, the assistant's voice dropped to a whisper. "It wasn't Judge Kerr's idea to approve it. You know, someone from Fenton Construction paid a personal visit. They brought paperwork for a campaign donation that very same week." The words stopped him cold in his tracks. He turned back, his eyes wide. "Are you telling me this was bought?" The assistant offered no reply, just a slow, deliberate nod before softly closing the door. Later that night, Rodney found himself parked in his truck outside a Waffle House just off Highway 17. Rain traced paths down the windshield as he replayed the day's events. He had chased paper trails from one office to the next, and every single one pointed to the same name: Fenton Construction, the corporate giant behind the Magnolia Grove development. He took a deep breath, pulled out his phone, and dialed Jesse. "I've found something huge." Rodney's voice was low and urgent. "A forged signature. County approval that was purchased with campaign donation. It all leads back to Fenton." Jesse let out a sharp breath on the other end of the line. "Rod, that's criminal. If we can prove bribery or fraud, this becomes much more than just a civil case." Rodney watched the headlights of passing cars streak by. "I'm not looking for revenge. I just want to restore my family's name to where it rightfully belongs." "You will," Jesse assured him, "but from now on, you need to keep your head down. They're going to know you're digging." Jesse wasn't wrong. Just 2 days later, Rodney spotted the same black SUV. It was parked directly across from his house. No recognizable plates, deeply tinted windows, its engine humming for hours on end. The moment he stepped outside, it pulled away from the curb, slowly and deliberately. That night, he called Benny. "They're watching me," he said. "Who's watching you?" Benny asked, his voice tight with concern. "The developers. Maybe someone from the HOA. It doesn't matter. I'm not stopping." Benny was quiet for a long moment on the other end. "Rod, are you absolutely sure this is worth it? These are powerful people." Rodney's reply was immediate, filled with conviction. "So was my grandfather. He didn't have a team of lawyers or deep pockets, but he had the truth on his side. And for me, that's enough." Over the following month, Rodney painstakingly built his case in the shadows, gathering sworn affidavits from old neighbors. He collected copies of every single tax payment, found photographs of his father working the land, until the walls of his living room became a sprawling timeline. It was a collage of irrefutable truth that no one could simply ignore. Then, late one night, while sifting through the county's online database, he stumbled upon something that made his stomach plummet. The development's official title documents had been recently updated. His family's name was now completely gone from the property registry. Someone had digitally erased it. He grabbed his phone and called Jesse immediately. "They've erased my ownership records," Jesse seethed, his voice a low growl. "That's blatant tampering with public data. We'll file for a court order at dawn," Rodney replied, ending the call to stare at his monitor, where all traces of his family's claim had vanished in a single day. He felt something harden inside him, a feeling that went beyond anger and solidified into pure resolve. They wanted him to be silent. Instead, they had just handed him the most damning proof he could have hoped for. He raised his phone and began recording a short, direct video message. "My name is Rodney Calhoun. My family's land is being stolen by people who believe their money places them above the truth. If anything happens to me, this file becomes public." He saved the video to a flash drive and carefully slid it away. It went into the same fireproof box that protected his grandfather's deed. But as the days crawled by, the pressure began to suffocate him. Rodney came to a grim realization. The paper trail wasn't going to be enough. He needed the law to speak for him, and that meant stepping into a courtroom. He would have to stand face to face with the people who were trying to erase him. The harassment started subtly, with anonymous letters in his mailbox. They were typed on plain white paper. The first one read, "You're making a grave mistake, Mr. Calhoun. Walk away while you still have the chance." No signature, no return address. At first, he brushed it off. He assumed it was just someone from the HOA trying to rattle him. But then the second letter arrived. "You won't win. They always win." By the time the third note was slipped under his front door in the dead of night, sleep had become a distant memory. The following morning, Rodney presented the letters to Jesse. The attorney studied them, his brow creasing with concern. "Whoever is sending these wants you to back down, but they're getting sloppy, desperate. Keep every single one. We'll turn them over to law enforcement if this escalates," Jesse advised. "I've dealt with threats before," Rodney said quietly, "but this feels different. It's like they're watching me." Jesse leaned in, his expression serious. "They probably are. You've cornered them, Rod, and when powerful people start to panic, they don't play fair." Rodney nodded slowly, saying nothing. He was too worn down for fear. That afternoon, he drove out to the property once more. The subdivision was nearly a finished reality now, with its fresh asphalt, gleaming new streetlights, and manicured lawns. The sign at the entrance had been replaced. "Welcome to Magnolia Grove, a community by Fenton Homes." He parked along the curb, the words stinging like an insult. A man in a golf cart pulled up alongside him, wearing a white polo with the HOA logo and a pair of dark, unreadable sunglasses. "Are you Calhoun?" The man's question was flat and cold. Rodney turned to face him. "That's right. I'm Trent Harper, president of the Magnolia Grove HOA," the man announced, his tone dripping with superiority. "We have been informed that you've been trespassing on private property." Rodney crossed his arms. "Private? You're referring to my land." Trent's smile was a thin, humorless line. "That will be for the courts to decide. In the meantime, I suggest you stay clear of this area. Our homeowners don't take kindly to strangers showing up uninvited." Rodney held his gaze. "If you're so confident it's yours, then why the threats?" Trent's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Consider this, your final warning." He then drove off, the sound of tires crunching on the gravel. Rodney stood there for a long, silent moment. He watched the cart disappear down the road as the wind rustled through the pine trees. He could feel anger boiling just beneath the surface. It wasn't loud, but steady and persistent, like an engine idling. That night, he heard the distinct sound of tires on gravel. He peeked through his curtain to see headlights pause at his driveway before vanishing into the night. It was the same black SUV he'd seen before. He grabbed his phone and dialed Benny. "They're out front again," Rodney said, his voice low. "Call the police. I did that last week." A deputy came out and said that unless they set foot on my property, his hands were tied. A heavy silence filled the line. Then Benny sighed. "Rod, this is escalating into something truly dangerous. Are you sure you don't want to stay with family for a little while?" Rodney's eyes swept over his home, the well-loved furniture, the framed photo of his parents proudly displayed on the mantel. The aroma of fresh coffee grounds still lingered in the kitchen. "This is my family, Benny. I'm not running." The very next day, the situation worsened. He found another letter, this one delivered by hand. There was no envelope, only a single line written in stark black ink. "Drop the lawsuit or lose more than your land." That evening, he went back to see Jesse, whose attorney's office was cast in shadow. Towers of files were piled high on every surface. "They're escalating," Jesse stated after reading the note. "We're reporting this one to the sheriff. I'll also reach out to a contact in the state's attorney's office, see if we can get a harassment case moving." Rodney rubbed his forehead wearily. "I don't need protection, Jesse. I need justice." The lawyer leaned back. "You will get it. But in the meantime, be smart. Don't travel by yourself, and keep that flash drive you told me about in a secure location." A small, determined smile touched Rodney's lips. Already done. The week that followed felt like navigating through a thick, disorienting fog. Everywhere he went, he felt unseen eyes watching him, a dark sedan parked near the grocery store, a stranger loitering by his front gate. The sense of being followed was no longer paranoia. It was a cold, hard fact. But the breaking point finally came on a Friday evening. Rodney returned home to discover his front door slightly ajar. He froze. The lock was splintered, and inside, drawers had been ransacked. Papers were scattered across the floor. His computer was gone, but nothing else of value was taken. Not the television, not the tools, not even the cash left in the kitchen drawer. They weren't robbing him, they were searching for his evidence. He stood motionless in the doorway for a long time. Taking slow, deep breaths to steady his nerves, he picked up the phone and called Jesse again. "They broke in," he stated quietly. Jesse's tone sharpened instantly. "Are you safe?" "Yeah, but they took the laptop, but everything was backed up on the drive." "Good. I'm calling the sheriff right now. This is no longer just intimidation. This is tampering with evidence." Rodney hung up and walked out to the backyard, the sky a deep, bruised orange. As the sun dipped below the trees, he felt a profound weariness, yet something inside him hardened into steel. They could steal, they could threaten, they could even follow him, but they could never bury the truth. 1 week later, Sheriff's Deputy Lydia Crane came by to file a formal report. She was calm, professional, and chose her words carefully. "I can't promise they'll find who did this," she conceded. "But if this is connected to your court case, the DA's office is going to want to be involved." Rodney nodded. "That's all I need. Someone who will see past the money." As she was leaving, she handed him a card. "Stay vigilant, Mr. Calhoun. You've kicked over a very big rock." He watched her car drive away, then turned toward the old fireproof box sitting beside his desk. He opened it one more time. Inside lay the deed, the flash drive, and the copy of the forged signature. He laid his hand on the papers and whispered, "Granddaddy, I'm not quitting, not now." But the next envelope he received wasn't from the HOA or an anonymous threat. It came from the courthouse. Inside was a summons with his name printed at the top. Magnolia Grove Holdings versus Rodney Calhoun. The envelope confirmed it. They were suing him first, which meant the real war had just begun. It sat on Rodney's kitchen counter for almost an hour before he dared to open it. His hands were steady, but his stomach felt like it was twisting itself into a solid knot. The seal was stark: Charleston County Circuit Court. Inside lay a neatly folded packet of papers, 20 pages of dense legal jargon, stamped and dated. Plaintiff, Magnolia Grove Holdings, LLC. Defendant, Rodney Lee Calhoun. They were coming after him for defamation, obstruction of development, and intentional interference. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. They steal my land, and now I'm the one who's the criminal. He drove directly to Jesse's office that afternoon, storming in while the lawyer was on the phone, holding the documents like a weapon. "They're suing me," he announced, not even waiting for Jesse to hang up. Jesse took the packet, his eyes scanning the pages with practiced speed. This is their opening salvo. It's a textbook scare tactic. They want to drain your resources, make you spend, and force you to doubt yourself. It's standard in corporate property disputes, Rodney muttered. Feels more like a declaration of war. In a way, it is, Jesse said. But here's the thing. They've just handed us an official invitation to countersue. We will respond with our own claim: fraudulent acquisition, forged documentation, and harassment. Rodney stared at the legal papers, the weight of the words sinking in. "So, this is it then." "This is it," Jesse confirmed. "And we're going to do this the right way. No shouting matches, no emotion in the courtroom, only facts and proof." Over the next few days, the tension throughout the town thickened. Magnolia Grove was no longer just a development. It was a full-blown spectacle. Local news outlets began reporting whispers about a retired surveyor's claim that an entire neighborhood was built on stolen land. Some neighbors saw Rodney as a hero, while others viewed him as a troublemaker threatening their property values. He tried to tune it out, focusing only on gathering his evidence: old photographs, signed affidavits, and notarized documents from Clara at the archives. Every night, he and Jesse reviewed them, their voices echoing in the dim office. "You have something they can never fake," Jesse remarked one evening, holding up the original deed. This is your anchor." Rodney nodded. "And they're terrified of it." When the first hearing date finally came, the courthouse in downtown Charleston was packed with developers and lawyers. Reporters and even homeowners from Magnolia Grove filled the benches. Some glared at Rodney, while others just looked bewildered, as if they were completely unsure of who to believe. Jesse leaned over. "Remember, they're going to try and portray you as unreasonable. Keep your composure." Rodney straightened his tie. "I've dedicated my life to working with boundaries. I know precisely where my lines are." At that moment, the judge entered. The Honorable Judge Pamela Ross. The courtroom fell silent. She was known for her piercing intellect and her notoriously low tolerance for nonsense. The HOA's attorney, Jonathan Pike, was the first to stand, a polished man with a voice as smooth as glass. "Your Honor," he began, "this case is about a single individual interfering with lawful, productive development. Magnolia Grove Holdings has meticulously complied with every statute and regulation," he continued. "Mr. Calhoun's baseless claims have resulted in financial loss, public confusion, and severe reputational damage." Rodney sat motionless, his hands folded on the table. Jesse didn't even flinch. When it was their turn, he rose calmly. "Your Honor, this case is not about interference. It is about theft. My client inherited the land in question through a legitimate, documented, and unbroken lineage. The plaintiffs had not only failed to secure legal title, they had constructed 96 homes on land that was, and still is, his. A wave of murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled frantically while Jonathan Pike offered a condescending smirk. "Mr. Brome, do you possess proof of this?" Jesse motioned to the clerk, who wheeled in a small cart stacked high with legal binders. "We do, starting with these tax receipts, survey plats, and an original deed signed in 1958. But the most damning piece," he revealed, "is this printed document, a rezoning approval forged under the name of a man who has been deceased for more than a decade. Gerald Calhoun?" The judge raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Forged? Yes, Your Honor. My client's father passed away in 2013. The signature used to approve this subdivision is dated 2019. You could feel the very air in the room change." Pike began to object, but Judge Ross cut him off with a raised hand. "Mr. Pike, is this true?" Pike hesitated. "Your Honor, we are in no position to confirm the authenticity of every single signature involved in decades of county filing." "That is not what I asked," she stated coldly. "Answer the question directly." He cleared his throat. "We will need time to verify this claim." Rodney sat back, watching the last shred of confidence drain from the lawyer's face. For the first time, the balance of power had finally shifted. When the hearing concluded, the judge ordered an immediate and temporary halt on any future sales in Magnolia Grove until ownership could be unequivocally verified. The courtroom was abuzz as people began to file out. Rodney stood slowly, exhausted yet steady. Outside, a reporter shoved a microphone toward him. "Mr. Calhoun, do you believe you'll win this case?" He considered the question for a moment before answering, "I don't believe it. I know it. Because the truth doesn't need lawyers to dress it up." As he walked toward his truck, Jesse caught up to walk alongside him. "You handled that perfectly." The judge saw right through their entire charade. Rodney offered a tired smile. "Yeah, but they're far from done. They'll dig deeper now. They'll fight harder. Then we will be ready for them," Jesse declared. That night, back in the quiet of his home, Rodney sat in silence as the phone rang non-stop with calls from reporters, distant cousins, even strangers. They were all thanking him for standing up to corporate greed. But beneath all the noise, there was a lingering thought he simply couldn't shake. If the county had allowed this kind of fraud to happen even once, how many other families had lost their land? In the very same way, he opened his grandfather's deed again, tracing the faded ink with his finger. "You told me to keep the papers safe," he whispered. "I did. And now, they're going to speak, louder than anyone in that courtroom." But while the court had paused the construction, it hadn't stopped the approaching storm. Behind the scenes, developers were scrambling, and the homeowners, those 96 families, were about to learn the awful truth. And when they did, nothing in Magnolia Grove would ever be the same again. The courthouse was full long before sunrise. Word had spread like a wildfire. The man who claimed an entire neighborhood was built on his land was back in court. And today, Judge Ross would review the final pieces of evidence. Rodney arrived early, with Jesse by his side. He wore the same dark gray suit he had worn to his father's funeral, his hands steady in stark contrast to the tension locked in his jaw. Outside, news vans lined the street, reporters shouting his name as he walked up the steps. He ignored them all. Inside, the air was thick with whispers. The homeowners filled the benches, some pale with worry, others glaring at Rodney with pure contempt, as if he were poised to steal the very roofs from their homes. Across the aisle sat the developers with their legal team, 3 rows of polished suits. Their heads were huddled together, whispering last-minute strategies. Jesse leaned in close. "Stay composed. Let them speak first. They're going to try and spin this." The judge entered, her gavel striking the block with a single, sharp crack. "This court is now in session." Jonathan Pike, the HOA's counsel, rose. He stood first, his voice as smooth as ever. "Your Honor, while the defense has made some rather dramatic claims, Magnolia Grove Holdings remains confident that all our documentation was obtained in good faith. Any clerical errors are the county's responsibility, not ours." Judge Ross peered down over her glasses. "And the matter of the alleged forged signature?" Pike cleared his throat. "We have launched an internal review. However, it is entirely possible the document was signed by an authorized family representative," Rodney whispered. "He's lying." Jesse gave a slight nod. "Let him finish," Pike continued. "At worst, this is merely a misunderstanding, not a criminal act. Halting development now would unfairly penalize innocent homeowners." When he sat, Jesse stood, straightening his tie. "Your Honor, my client has no desire to penalize homeowners. He seeks the truth, and the truth is sitting right here in this binder." He placed a thick folder on the table and opened it with deliberation. Slowly, every page marked with tabs. This includes property tax records from 1971 to 2024, all paid under the Calhoun family name. It includes survey maps confirming the very same metes and bounds listed in the 1958 deed. And this, he paused, holding up a single yellowed page, is the deed itself. The courtroom fell silent as Jesse read from it aloud. Parcel 19A, Goose Creek County, 71 acres, purchased by Hiram Calhoun, witnessed and sealed by the County of Charleston, dated November 2nd, 1958. He then placed another sheet beside it. The rezoning approval dated 2019. And this, he said, is the fraudulent document used to authorize the Magnolia Grove subdivision. Note the signature, Gerald Calhoun. Dated 6 years after the man's death. He handed both documents to the judge. She studied them for a long, quiet moment. Then, she looked directly at Pike. "Mr. Pike, would you care to explain how a deceased man signed this form?" Pike shifted in his seat. "Your Honor, we have reason to believe the form may have been pre-signed prior to his passing." Jesse's sharp laugh cut through the silence. "Pre-signed? A zoning request dated years after his death?" The judge frowned. "Mr. Pike, I find your explanation insulting to the intelligence of this court." Then Jesse motioned toward the back of the courtroom. "Your Honor, we would like to call a witness, Miss Clara Bynes, a former clerk at the Charleston County Archive." Clara, wearing a floral dress and clutching a folder of her own, stepped forward nervously. Jesse approached her gently. "Miss Bynes, you have reviewed this rezoning file?" "Yes," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I printed it myself years ago. The signature on that document was not part of the original submission. It was added later." The judge leaned forward. "Added later?" Clara nodded. "After the approval date, you can tell by the ink and the timestamp metadata. Someone tampered with the digital copy." Gasps echoed through the room. One of the homeowners covered her mouth. Pike shot to his feet. "Objection. Speculative testimony." "Overruled," Judge Ross said firmly. "Continue, Miss Bynes. The digital log reveals the file was altered by a user account traced directly to Fenton Construction's legal department." With that, Clara rested her case. The judge fixed her gaze back on Pike. "Mr. Pike, is your client prepared to refute this evidence?" Pike faltered. "Your Honor, But the judge silenced him. "Don't. This court will subpoena the department's full records. Until then, all development is frozen." She then turned to Rodney. "Mr. Calhoun, I believe you have conducted yourself with remarkable restraint. Throughout this entire ordeal, your documentation has proven authentic and consistent with the county's own record. Pending final verification, the land is legally yours." For several heartbeats, the room was utterly silent. Then a shockwave of voices erupted. Reporters, attorneys, and even the homeowners began whispering in stunned disbelief, until one man in the crowd rose to his feet. "So, what becomes of our homes?" Judge Ross lifted her gavel. "That is a matter for the developers and the county to resolve, not Mr. Calhoun. This hearing is adjourned." The gavel fell, its sound echoing with finality. Rodney remained in his seat as the courtroom emptied, a profound calm settling over him. Jesse gave him a half smile. "You actually did it, Rod. You just rewrote history." Rodney let out a long, slow breath. "I didn't do it alone. My grandfather and my father. They did the heaviest lifting. I just made certain no one would forget." Outside, a swarm of microphones and cameras descended upon him, questions firing from all sides. "Mr. Calhoun, will you evict the homeowners? Are you going to sell the land back to the county? What are your plans now?" He held up a hand, pausing before he spoke. "I'm not here to take away anyone's home. I'm here as a reminder that the truth, eventually, finds its way to the light. You can build any wall you please, but if it stands on a stolen foundation, it is destined to crumble." That single line led the evening news. That night, sitting alone on his porch with the deed resting in his lap, the true weight of it all finally began to sink in. The flashing cameras, the applause, the victory in court, none of it could erase the long years of being ignored. The veiled threats, the profound loneliness. But this meant something more. His family's name was restored to its rightful place. He gazed toward the horizon, where the distant lights of Magnolia Grove glimmered faintly through the trees. "They built their perfect dream on my family's land," he murmured softly. "Now, perhaps, they'll finally learn what it means to respect the ground beneath their feet." But Rodney couldn't yet see the chain reaction the verdict had ignited. The developers were in a state of panic. Investors were already pulling their money, and the homeowners were redirecting their fury. They were turning on the very people who had sold them a lie, and the fallout was about to become more severe than anyone could have imagined. By the following morning, the story had exploded. Headlines blazed across local and national news. Court confirms developer built 96 homes on disputed land. Rodney's phone began to ring incessantly, with calls from journalists, lawyers, and even complete strangers. Many were thanking him for standing up for the little guy, but not every message was one of support. One voicemail stood out from the rest. The voice was strained, trembling with emotion. Mr. Calhoun, my name is Lydia Burns. My husband and I, we bought one of those homes last year. We had no idea. Oh God, we had no idea. Please, can you just tell me what's going to happen to us? Rodney sat at his kitchen table for a very long time before he finally dialed her number. When she answered, her voice was completely raw. We have 2 little children, Mr. Calhoun. We invested everything we had in that house. What happens if the land isn't truly ours? He interjected softly. Ma'am, I'm not targeting anyone who purchased their home in good faith. I am pursuing the people who deceived all of us. A silence hung in the air, and he could hear her quiet sobs. Thank you, she whispered. Before she ended the call, its weight settled on him. It was a stark reminder that this was no longer just a legal dispute. It was deeply human, involving real families. Children, and people simply attempting to build their lives, were now ensnared in a catastrophe they had no part in creating. Meanwhile, the public fury directed at Fenton Construction was savage. By midweek, the company's headquarters in Greenville was completely overrun by reporters. The CEO, Brian Fenton, delivered a brief press conference, his usual polished demeanor having completely vanished. We concede there are discrepancies in certain official records, he stated rigidly, reading from a prepared document. Our company proceeded based on approvals from the county, and we will offer our full cooperation with the ongoing investigations. But mere cooperation was not enough to salvage their reputation. Investors withdrew their funding almost overnight. Lawsuits began to flood in from every direction from furious homeowners, the county itself, and even smaller contractors who were never compensated. Magnolia Grove, once advertised as the vibrant new center of Goose Creek, had become a monument to corruption and corporate avarice. Rodney did his best to avoid the media frenzy, but people managed to find him regardless. Complete strangers would approach him in the grocery store. Some offered their gratitude, while others laid the blame squarely on him. One afternoon, as he was filling his truck with gas, a man, one of the new homeowners, came up to him. He was in his mid-30s, wearing a work shirt and a baseball cap. "You're Calhoun?" the man demanded. Rodney gave a weary nod. The man's gaze was like stone. "You've destroyed my life. My house is now worthless. Are you happy?" Rodney remained composed. "You purchased that home believing their assurances that it was secure. I am truly sorry for what they put you through, but I am not the one who told the lies." The man just shook his head. "You could have just sold. Everyone could have walked away from this unscathed." "Perhaps," Rodney conceded, "but then they would just do it all over again to someone else." The man offered no reply. He simply spun around and walked away, the sound of his boots grinding on the pavement. That evening, Rodney met with Jesse at a small diner off Highway 176. The lawyer looked utterly spent, but a sense of accomplishment shone through. "The county has officially revoked the developer's permits," Jesse announced. "They're putting a hold on all their future projects, pending a full internal audit." Rodney arched an eyebrow. "Are you saying they're finally cleaning house?" "It certainly appears that way, and the state's attorney is requesting your assistance as a key witness in the fraud case. Are you prepared for that?" Rodney slowly stirred his coffee. "If it guarantees no one else has to endure this, then yes." A faint smile touched Jesse's lips. "You know, I've watched people completely fall apart under this kind of pressure. But you never did." Rodney gazed out the window. He watched the rain smear the streetlights into blurry streaks. "When you're brought up around men like my grandfather, you learn one thing above all else. You do not retreat from what is right." For weeks, Magnolia Grove devolved into a ghost town entangled in a web of lawsuits. Some homeowners packed their belongings and left, uncertain of their next move. Others chose to remain, clinging to the hope that the courts would eventually grant them legal title to the land. The county proposed a temporary solution: occupancy without official ownership. This arrangement would stand until the entire case was resolved. Rodney found no reason to celebrate. He filled his days mending fences and cutting the grass along the original boundary of his property. It was a surreal experience, seeing those houses from his own backyard. The very same land where he had once run barefoot as a boy was now marked by cul-de-sacs and rows of mailboxes. Then, one afternoon, while he was working by the old pecan grove, a car he recognized rolled to a stop. It was Lydia Burns, the very woman who had reached out to him weeks ago. She emerged from the car, clutching a small paper bag. "I needed to thank you," she said, her voice steady. Most people around here have decided you're the bad guy, but you were the only one brave enough to speak the truth." She offered him the bag. Inside, a loaf of cornbread, still radiating warmth. A soft smile touched his lips. "You really didn't have to do this." "I did," she insisted, "because while my husband and I may lose our home, we finally have our eyes open. We were building a life on stolen ground and never even knew." Rodney's gaze fell to the very soil beneath their feet. "You can build again," he offered gently. "Maybe not right here, but somewhere honest." She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You're a decent man, Mr. Calhoun." After she drove away, Rodney sat on his tailgate, watching the sunset bleed across the vast horizon. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he felt a sense of peace. Not the thrill of victory, just a quiet calm. Later that evening, the phone shattered the silence. It was Jesse. "Are you watching the news?" Rodney switched on the television just as Brian Fenton was being led from his office. In handcuffs, fraud, forgery, conspiracy. The allegations scrolled relentlessly across the bottom of the screen. Jesse's voice crackled through the phone. "You actually did it, Rod. They're already calling it the biggest land fraud case in the history of South Carolina." But Rodney didn't smile. His eyes were fixed on the dark silhouette of trees out the window, the very trees separating his property from Magnolia Grove. "No," he said softly. "My grandfather did. He's the one who left the truth buried here. All I did was bring it into the light." Yet even as justice was finally being served, one monumental decision still rested solely on Rodney's shoulders. What was to become of the land, now that it was, at long last, legally his? That single choice would define the Calhoun legacy for generations to come. A month after the court's final ruling, the last of the Magnolia Grove signs were being taken down. The sales banners, the fluttering flags, the gleaming billboards that promised a life of luxury, all of it was stripped away like old peeling paint. The land fell silent once more. Half-finished houses stood like hollow monuments to greed, frozen in mid-construction. Rodney parked his truck at the main entrance, the exact spot where, nearly 2 years prior, he had first confronted the construction crews. The road was already cracked from neglect, with stubborn weeds pushing their way through the asphalt. He stepped out of the truck, taking his time. Breathing in the thick Carolina air, he walked past the first cul-de-sac, where a single mailbox still bore the name, the Burnses. The letters were already fading. Most of the families had moved on after the judgment, some accepting buyouts. Others were left to fight their own smaller battles in court. The few who remained would often wave when they saw him now, not with bitterness, but with a quiet, knowing respect. He stopped near the old pecan grove. The trees were thinner now, scarred by the stumps left behind where the bulldozers had torn through. But a handful still stood tall, defiant, their roots anchored deep and unmoving in the soil. Rodney rested a hand against the coarse bark of one of the survivors. It felt rough beneath his palm. "You made it through," he murmured. "I guess we both did." In the distance, the sound of an approaching car broke the silence. It was Jesse, who got out holding a thick stack of folders. "You sure you don't want to sell a piece of this, Rod?" he asked, only half joking. "Developers from Columbia are already making offers again. Legitimate ones, this time." Rodney let out a dry chuckle. "You think after everything I'd just hand it over to another man in a suit?" Jesse smiled. "Figured not. But you could build something real out here, something that actually means something." Rodney gazed out across the vacant neighborhood. "Yeah," he said. "I've been thinking a lot about that." He had wrestled with the decision through countless sleepless nights. Selling would be simple, forgetting even simpler, but neither path was one he could walk. He knew what became of people who bartered away their history. They watched it vanish, piece by piece, silently and irrevocably. Instead, he chose a different path, to resurrect it, to transform the Calhoun property into a community hub with sprawling farmland, the very vision his grandfather had once cherished. It would be a sanctuary where local families could cultivate the earth, teach their children the lessons of the land, and rediscover the profound meaning of working it, not merely to possess it. Within a month, with Jesse's guidance, the legalities were settled, and the Calhoun Family Foundation was born, a nonprofit organization chartered with a solemn mission: to safeguard the history etched into the soil of South Carolina, and to shield small landowners from the predatory grip of fraudulent seizures. When the story finally broke on the evening news, the cameras found Rodney. He was standing beside a newly carved wooden sign that declared, "Calhoun Grounds, established 1958, reclaimed 2025. A reporter asked what fueled his long and arduous fight. He met the camera's gaze directly and stated, "Because the moment you cease to protect your history, someone else will rewrite it for you." Those words caught fire, spreading far beyond a simple quote to become a solemn warning. It became a rallying cry for families across the state embroiled in similar battles. And as it did, the months turned into seasons. The legal proceedings against Fenton Construction continued their slow, grinding pace. But Rodney kept his distance. He had had his fill of courtroom. He was finished with microphones and glaring headlines. His days were now measured in rebuilt fences and mended irrigation lines, and in watching volunteers plant neat rows of vegetables where deep ruts from driveways once scarred the earth. Occasionally, Lydia Burns would visit with her children to help plant young pecan saplings. "This," she would tell them, "is where we learned what integrity looks like." On tranquil afternoons, Benny would arrive with sweet tea and memories of their shared childhood. "You realize," Benny mused one day, "you actually turned your granddaddy's warning into a piece of history." A slow smile spread across Rodney's face as he leaned against the tailgate of his truck. "I suppose I did," he replied. "He told me to keep the papers safe. I just never imagined I'd have to defend them like this." His gaze drifted toward the distant tree line. A gentle breeze drifted from the trees, carrying the rich scent of earth and recent rain. "You know, Benny," he began, "money is a fleeting thing, easily lost. But a good name, that's the one thing you can never truly reclaim once someone steals it." As he spoke, the sun began its descent. It painted the horizon with strokes of fiery orange and burnished gold. Rodney sat in silence, watching the fading light spill across the land, the very land his family had fought for. The sound of volunteers' laughter drifted across the fields, weaving through the evening chorus of crickets. It mixed with the soft rustle of leaves in the trees, and for the first time in years, a profound sense of rightness settled over him. His thoughts turned to his grandfather. He pictured him standing on this very soil decades before, hands calloused, back unbent, eyes filled with pride. Then, he remembered his father's words. The county might have a short memory, but paper never lies. A genuine smile touched his lips just before he decided to head home. Rodney paused for one final look at the sign marking the property line, its carved lettering seeming to catch the very last rays of the fading day. It glowed with a faint, golden hue. He whispered, almost to the wind itself, "We held our ground." Then he walked to his truck, climbed in, and drove slowly down the dirt road. The crunch of gravel beneath his tires was like a heartbeat, steady, certain, and unbroken. The true moral of Rodney's story was never just about the land. It was about legacy. It was about patience in a world that praises shortcuts, and about truth in a system that thrives on backroom deals and favors. Because sometimes, the most important fight isn't for what you stand to gain, but for what you can never afford to lose. So, if you have ever been told to give up, so when you feel overwhelmed and outnumbered, remember the name Rodney Calhoun, a man who stood firm against impossible odds. He held his ground, reminding us all that proof, patience, and principle are timeless virtues. If narratives like this, centered on justice, integrity, and the very essence of fighting for what is right, then be sure to subscribe for more, because there are some truths that must be echoed time and time again until the entire world finally remembers how to truly listen.